Hello, romance book lovers. Welcome to Tales from the Heart. I'm Jenna Harte, and each week I post new episodes from my stories of crime and passion. Right now we're listening to With This Ring I Thee Kill, Book 3 of the Valentine Mysteries. This week is Episode 12, Chapter 12. Now, if you'd like to read along or get ahead in the story, you can get With This Ring I Thee Kill from your favorite ebook retailer or save by buying direct from me. Now, With This Ring I Thee Kill is the third book in the series. If you missed Book 1, Deadly Valentine, you can listen by checking earlier episode postings, or if you'd like to read it, you can get the book free at my website, jennaharte.com. Book 2, Old Flames Never Die, is available in earlier episode postings as well, or available at your favorite ebook retailer, or again, less through my shop. Tales from the Heart is posted to podcast platforms and YouTube each week. These episodes are edited to censor out intimate content. Now, if you'd like to have a version that includes spicy bits, plus get early access, behind-the-scenes information about the stories, bonus content, and more, join me over at Ream Stories. You can learn more at reamstories.com/Jenna Harte. Never miss the mystery or romance by hitting the subscribe button, and remember that all the details and links you might need are just a click away in the description. Now snuggle up, get comfy, and enjoy the show.
Chapter 12. Tess shifted, wincing at the plastic zip tie cutting into her wrists. Her abductor used one to bind her feet as well. She watched him while sitting in an office chair in a small storeroom of the warehouse where he'd brought her. The area looked like a ghost town as they'd driven up. Dusty, hot, and devoid of life. She'd expected the warehouse to be empty, but instead it was filled with crates and furniture that to her untrained eye looked old. It made her think of Bigby. Her abductor punched the numbers she'd given him to Jack's cell phone. She hoped that Daniel would be able to trace the call, but thought it was more likely the phone was disposable, untraceable.
"I've got something of yours,"
the man said into the phone.
"I'll trade her for the blue heart ring."
Tess strained to hear what Jack was saying.
"I've got her with me. She's unharmed for now."
She didn't like the "for now" comment. She wondered if she would remain unharmed when the ring was handed over. The man thrust the phone at her.
"Tell him you're not hurt. Nothing more."
Jack?
She wanted to hear his voice and at the same time not wanting to hear the fear that would be in it.
"Tess, are you hurt? Do you know where you are?"
I'm fine.
She searched her brain for a way to give him a clue to where she was without tipping off her abductor. But Tess couldn't think of a clever clue, not with a gun in her face and zip ties on her wrists.
"You heard her. She's fine. You've got 2 hours to get the ring. I'll call at that time to let you know where to make the exchange."
Again, Tess leaned closer to hear what Jack was saying. She knew he had the ring in a safe deposit box in town. He didn't need 2 hours.
"You're not in a position to make demands,"
the man said. Tess waited as the man listened. She watched his face as he pondered whatever Jack said. Ponder wasn't the right word. He looked uncertain.
"Fine, I'll call in 2 hours."
He flipped his phone shut.
"I hope you're comfortable because you have a while to wait."
Tess didn't like that she had to wait, but she understood that Jack negotiated the time Daniel needed to come up with a plan.
I could use some water. It's hot in here.
The guy sniffed.
"You got change?"
You grabbed me while I was running. No, I don't have change.
"If you had change, there is a vending machine."
You're about to get a very expensive ring. Certainly you can spare a buck.
"You're pretty mouthy considering your situation."
He appeared more amused than offended.
I'll pay you back.
He laughed.
"Yeah, sure, why not? I have to make a call anyway."
"That was good, Jack,"
Daniel said. At another time, Jack would have balked at being talked to like a child.
"I hate making her wait. I could have that ring in 2 seconds.
He checked his watch, knowing that since it was a Saturday, he'd need to get the ring from the bank before it closed at 1 o'clock.
"I know, but we need to make a plan."
They didn't even know where she was. Daniel talked to someone on the phone about tracing the call. Jack wasn't too hopeful. A kidnapper with any sense would use an untraceable phone. He determined then that his company's next project would be finding a way to trace untraceable phones. An officer entered Jack's home office.
Ms. Tamblyn identified this guy as the one who took Ms. Madison.
Daniel took the picture.
"Who is it?"
Jack asked.
"Hoyt Puckett. He works for Bigby,"
Daniel said.
She also said she thought he was the one that attacked her.
That guy doesn't look like someone who'd want a centuries-old French royal ring,
Jack stated.
He probably doesn't.
Daniel said.
He probably wants the money someone's paying him to get it.
Bigby?
Maybe.
Daniel turned to the officer.
Has anyone been sent to Puckett's home?
Yes, sir. Officers Kurtz and Wales.
I want them to call me directly when they get there.
Yes, sir.
The officer pulled his cell phone out and stepped out of Jack's office.
I'm heading over to talk to Tim and then Bigby,
Daniel said.
I'm going with you,
Jack said.
It would be better if you stayed here.
Maybe, but I'm going anyway. You can let me ride along or I'll follow you.
Daniel studied Jack and then acquiesced.
Let's go then.
Tess wasn't an orange soda drinker normally. She would have preferred a diet cola or root beer, but it quenched her thirst and the sugar renewed her energy. She felt like a child having to use 2 hands tied together to drink it. Her abductor gave her the drink and then left her alone. She wished she knew how soon he'd return. Was he in the building? Had he left? She couldn't tell. She rolled the office chair she sat in near the door, pressing her ear to it. Silence. She was about to move away when she heard a door open. Then she heard talking. She strained to hear their voices, but could only hear muffled sounds. She couldn't pick out the details, but the tone was heated. She knew by the call her kidnapper made in the car and the uncertainty on his face when Jack made demands of his own. He wasn't the one calling the shots. So was the other person the ringleader? Was it Bigby? Who else would have a warehouse full of antique-looking furniture and crates? His was the only auction house in town, in the county. It was hard to imagine that a man of Bigby's success and stature in the community would risk so much, especially considering how old he was. Did he really need to steal to afford his retirement? But at the moment, Tess didn't really care why or even who. What she wanted was out. She looked down at her restraints and determined the time was now or never. Replaying a safety video Kate made her watch after she was held at gunpoint by Jack's old girlfriend through her mind, Tess used her teeth to position the clamp of the plastic ties between her wrists. She stood, steadying herself on her bound feet. She lifted her hands overhead, and then brought them down hard against her belly, pulling her shoulder blades back as she did. The restraints bit into her skin, but didn't break. She frowned. It looked easy on the video. She lifted her arms and tried again. The only thing she accomplished was imprinting the band on her wrists. A new sliver of panic slid up her spine. She sat back in the chair to think. Then she remembered the tip about shimming the clasp. She tried to maneuver her hand so she could slip her nail in and release the binding, but she couldn't get the angle. She looked around the small space for a paperclip or other thin item she could use instead. Nothing. Frustrated, she shook her hands, willing the binding to release. The only thing she got was a slap in the face by the end of the tie. She sat, helpless.
These things should be outlawed.
She looked hopelessly at the impenetrable plastic.
Oh,
She gasped as an idea came to her. She lifted her hands, bringing the long end of the tie to her mouth. She guided the tie end so that she could hold it in her hand. She manipulated the end to shimmy it into the clasp, except it wasn't long enough. Using her mouth to help her again, she used her hand to grab the tie end farther down. Feeling like a finger contortionist, she pressed the tip of the tie into the binding. When it was in, she pulled against the restraints, hoping the ties would open. Instead, her shimmy slipped out. She let out an expletive and started over. This time, once the shimmy was in, she used her teeth to get a better grip and push it down further. Holding it in place with her teeth, she worked her hands until the restraints loosened and she pulled her hands free.
I owe you big, Kate.
She rubbed her stinging wrists. She used the end of the tie that bound her hands to shimmy the zip tie off her ankles. Once free, she went to the door to listen. She could hear talking, but it wasn't as loud. Afraid they might see or hear her if she opened the door, Tess turned to the only other means of escape: the window. The bottom of it was about 4 feet off the ground, which meant Tess would need to jump or use the chair to get out. That was assuming she could get it opened since it looked like it hadn't been open in years. She rolled the chair to the window, and bracing it against the wall, she stood on the seat. She grabbed the lever holding it locked and pulled. It stuck, but her chair didn't. It slid away, rolling across the room. Tess held her breath and willed the chair to stop on its own accord instead of banging into the wall. It hit the plastic zip ties she'd left on the floor and skidded to a stop. She didn't wait to feel relief. She grabbed the chair again, and with greater care, worked to unlock the window. She was so focused on the window that she didn't hear anyone approaching until the knob of the door began to turn, and her abductor said,
She's in here if you want to see her.
Do you think it's odd that Cameron didn't come to see you?
Daniel asked as he drove with Jack to see Tim.
You'd think she'd want to help you.
Jack shrugged.
I don't know.
You didn't think it was odd?
A little.
Jack wasn't in the mood to talk. Daniel had his lights on and was driving above the speed limit, but it wasn't fast enough for Jack.
She's been staying with you a while. Have you seen anything off?
You're suspicious of her,
Jack commented on.
Aren't you?
There's a little too much coincidence in her story, but Tess trusts her.
Tess trusts her, so you're not allowed to have an opinion?
Daniel asked.
I doubted her instincts once and nearly lost her.
Daniel glanced at Jack.
You're talking about Liv Danforth.
Yes.
They stopped at the bank so Jack could get the ring. Then they headed to the long-term efficiency hotel Tim was staying in.
You're here because of a courtesy. Let me do all the talking,
Daniel said as they went up the stairs to Tim's room. Jack didn't respond. He figured he'd keep quiet, unless he had something to say.
What's the deal with all the cops?
Tim said when he let Daniel and Jack in.
I don't need babysitters.
It's to protect you.
From what?
Tess Madison was kidnapped this morning.
Who?
Tim sat at the small eating table and lit a cigarette.
The woman who hit you with a frying pan.
Jack wanted to take the burning cigarette and stuff it down Tim's smug throat. Tim winced as the memory came to him.
So? I didn't have anything to do with it. I've been here just like the terms of my release says.
I know. But maybe you know something that can help us get her back,
Daniel said.
I already told you everything I know.
You haven't told us anything. So tell me now. Who besides Cal are you working with?
Daniel said. Tim flicked an ash from his cigarette into a plastic cup.
If you want to hassle someone, why not hassle Cameron Tamblyn?
Were you working with her?
Daniel asked. Jack felt a slide of annoyance and guilt that he hadn't pushed harder on Cameron.
No, but she knows that ring better than anyone. Why don't you talk to her?
The kidnapper took a shot at Cameron this morning. If she's involved, why would her partner shoot at her?
Tim shrugged.
Maybe she screwed him over. He wouldn't be the first.
Jack wondered what he meant by that. Was Cameron playing an elaborate game? Tess was adamant that her friend wasn't like that, but suspicion nagged at him since the moment he learned Cameron and Tim once dated.
Do you know this man?
Daniel showed him Puckett's picture. Tim's no was too fast for him to have taken a good look at the photo.
Cameron says he pushed her down a flight of stairs and is the one who took Ms. Madison this morning. Sure you don't know him?
Tim shook his head unconvincingly.
I'll have to give him the ring to get Tess back. If I give him the ring, I can't give it to you.
Jack took the ring out of his pocket and set it in front of Tim. Daniel shot him a warning look.
We had a deal.
Tim stared longingly at the ring.
She comes first. Maybe if you had information that helped us get her back without my handing over the ring, then you could still have it.
You're giving him the ring?
Daniel said in disbelief.
I agreed to give it to him if he left us alone.
Which I did.
Tim said.
What about this guy? Did you tell this guy to leave them alone?
Daniel asked.
I still get the ring, right?
Tim turned his attention to Jack. Jack nodded. At that point, he'd give the guy the moon if he could save Tess.
He works at Bigby's. Muscle. Not muscle like breaking legs. Muscle like heavy lifting. He's not behind this?
We know he took her.
But he's not the leader. He's taking orders.
From who?
Jack demanded.
Talk to Cameron.
She's the leader? She wasn't even in the country when you broke into Feinstein's and killed him.
I didn't kill Mr. Feinstein.
Tim said.
Your partner killed him then, but it won't matter. You're a part of it and will go to jail for murder.
Daniel said. Tim sniffed.
So much you know.
What do you mean?
Jack moved closer to Tim, hoping they were on the verge of learning what they needed to save Tess.
Cal didn't kill him either. We're thieves, not murderers.
It was Cal's gun, both when you tried to rob Mr. Orlean and shot at him and when you killed Mr. Feinstein,
Daniel said. Jack decided not to mention the part where Cal nearly shot him on the sidewalk in Roslyn.
But he didn't pull the trigger.
So who did?
Daniel asked. Tim took a puff of his cigarette. The look on his face indicated he said all he was going to say.
He's saying there was a third person the night Mr. Feinstein was killed,
Jack said.
That could be the person who contacted Tim and Cal to let him know Mr. Orlean died, and that now was a good time to try for the ring.
Daniel picked up the ring and handed it back to Jack. Then he drew a chair from the table, turning it backwards to straddle it. He looked directly into Tim's eyes.
Who are you working with at Feinstein's? And before you tell me no one, consider that I believe you're purposefully hindering an investigation, which is grounds to send you back to jail.
Tim glared at Daniel.
You could try, but it wouldn't stick.
Daniel laughed in a menacing way Jack had only seen once before, when Daniel thought he'd attacked his father.
Stand up, Tim. I'm placing you under arrest.
You can't do that.
Watch me.
Daniel hauled Tim out of the chair.
My lawyer will...
It's Saturday. Your lawyer is probably fishing. There isn't phone reception at the best fishing spots.
Daniel spun Tim around to handcuff him.
Fine.
Tim interrupted.
I'll tell you.
Tess knew she had only one option. She sprinted, grabbed the plastic ties off the floor, and planted her butt in the chair. She wrapped one tie around her ankles, tucking the ends into her running socks. She looped the other around her wrists and laid her hands in her lap to hold them in place. Hopefully her abductor or his friend wouldn't need her to move.
What does it matter if she sees you? You'll have the ring in an hour and be on a plane to France before the day is over.
France. Tess's heart sank. It was Cameron. She didn't want to believe it. But who else would want the ring and take it to France? The betrayal hit deep. She nearly came out of her chair to confront Cameron, but remembered the gun. Would Cameron really kill her? No. Tess's logical mind couldn't believe Cameron would hurt her, but neither would Tess believe she'd be involved in theft and murder. What really didn't make sense was Cameron letting someone push her down the stairs or shoot at her. So maybe it wasn't Cameron. But who else could it be? Diane? Maybe Cameron was right about her. Diane managed all the inventory once it got on site. She could have easily taken the ring. Tess wondered if Feinstein was in on it too, or was it a mistake that the ring ended up in his jewelry store?
You better make sure she doesn't get hurt. What the hell were you thinking? I told you I'd get the ring, and yet you nab her and shoot at me?
Oh God, it was Cameron. Tess held back the tears of disbelief and betrayal that threatened.
You're not the boss of me,
the man said.
But I'm the one that can get the ring, you moron. You're both morons. Neither of you know what you're doing, and you're going to go to jail. You're sending us all to jail.
Shut up.
You both? Who did Cameron mean? Tim?
Valentine's time is almost up,
the man said.
I'm going to give him a call and arrange the exchange. He wants me to bring her along.
You're on your own now,
Cameron said.
I don't do business with idiots.
Suit yourself. More for us.
The door closed and their voices trailed off. Tess decided it was time to make her move. She leapt from the chair, dragging it to the window. She braced herself, putting all her weight into moving the lever. It moved, but only by small millimeters. Tess worried it would take her a week to get it open.
Come on,
she pleaded. She pushed the lever toward the window, then jerked it sideways. The latch moved just past its catch. She pushed the window outward and lifted her leg over the sill. The ground was farther away on the outside than the inside, but she didn't worry about that. She didn't mind risking a twisted ankle. When her lower body was outside, she pushed away and dropped to the ground. She stood, not bothering to dust herself off as she turned to run. Arms came around her, jerking her into a solid wall of man. She screamed, only to be cut off by a hand over her mouth.
Tess, it's Daniel.
It took a moment for it to sink in, but then she grabbed onto him.
Thank God you're here.
Come on, let's get out of here.
He grabbed her hand and led her along the building toward the woods.
Hurry.
Tess fought to keep up. He dragged her through the woods until she saw a dirt road with several police cars.
It's Cameron.
She said once she was out of sight of the warehouse.
I should have seen it.
She knew the police still had to arrest Cameron and her accomplices, but she was safe and Jack was at home waiting.
Can I borrow your phone to call Jack?
How many people are in the warehouse?
Daniel was in police mode, which was good. She worried she might fall apart if he acted like the concerned friend.
2. Cameron and a man I don't know.
Is this him?
He held out a picture. She nodded.
Yes, who is he?
He works for Bigby.
Is that what she was doing when she said she was investigating? Taking over Tim's work?
Are they armed?
Daniel asked, ignoring her question.
The man is. He has a gun. I don't know if Cameron does.
Daniel opened the door to the police car and motioned for her to get in.
You need to get into the car and let Officer Mitchell drive you home.
She nodded, knowing now wasn't the time to process what was going on. There would be time later after Daniel made the arrests.
Can I borrow a phone to call Jack, or will you call him?
The serious look on Daniel's face wiped away the relief she'd felt moments before.
Tell me he's not walking into that building.
Get in the car so I know you're safe and I can finish this.
You have to stop him.
I can't. He's already in.
Daniel, I can't leave him.
God, would they ever get a break?
You have to.
Before she could protest, he said,
I can't focus on helping him if I'm worried about you. None of us can, including him.
He was right. He and Jack would be distracted if they thought she was in danger. She closed her eyes, trying to contain the fear and panic.
Promise me you'll keep him safe.
He nodded, but didn't say anything. She knew he couldn't make that promise. Bad guys were unpredictable. She started to say something more, but he interrupted.
Tess, get in the car and go home. Get cleaned up for the wedding.
He turned and walked to a group of police standing watch at the side of the woods. She considered running after him, but knew it would be foolish. She needed him to focus on getting Jack out of the building, alive. She got in the car. As she shut the door, she realized that Daniel mentioned the wedding, which meant the preparations were still taking place even while she was missing. She only hoped whatever plan Daniel and Jack had concocted would work, because she had every intention of getting married today.
Normally, Jack wouldn't be caught dead in a truck, although he'd driven one to pick up housing materials when he worked for his mother's real estate flipping business as a teen. He'd since avoided them because of their environmental impact. But he wasn't going to waste time going back to his place to pick up a car, so he accepted the use of Daniel's brand new truck. Jack pulled into the parking lot of the warehouse. He hoped that Daniel's partner was right in determining this building was the best bet for the warehouse where Puckett would have brought Tess.
The phone signal is from this area. This building is owned by Bigby, while the rest are owned by Snyder and Sons.
Sam explained to Daniel. Jack didn't hang around to hear the details about who owned what. As long as the details indicated Tess was most likely there, that's all he needed to know. He waited a moment before getting out of the car. He hoped that Daniel and the police had enough time to get in place, and that the trees surrounding the area would make it easy for them to go unnoticed. Daniel suggested that Jack wear a wire, but Jack worried that Puckett would suspect that, so he took a deep breath and exited the car, knowing he was flying by the seat of his pants. The door swung open before he reached it. Cameron's surprised face met his.
Jack.
Cameron.
He shook his head at his own foolishness for not acting on his suspicions. All he could hope for was that Cameron cared enough about Tess not to kill her.
What are you doing here?
She asked. He'd her eyes searched the woods.
You have something I want,
he replied.
Why, Cameron? I already agreed to give it to you.
It's not what you think, Jack.
Jack was never one to play games, so he wasn't going to play along with Cameron.
Knock off the innocent bit, Cameron. I brought the ring. Release Tess and it's yours.
Who's there?
A man's voice yelled toward them.
You should go.
Cameron said.
I'm not leaving until I have Tess.
He pushed his way past her into the warehouse.
That's far enough.
Puckett said.
Where's Tess?
Jack demanded, looking for signs she was there.
She's safe. I want to see the ring.
Puckett said.
When I see Tess.
Jack caught movement behind a crate. Jacob Feinstein emerged from the shadows.
You make a lot of demands for a man who has no leverage.
No leverage is needed if everyone does what they've agreed to do,
Jack said.
You've already agreed to give the ring to Tim and Cameron. How can I trust that you have it now?
So you were the one Tim and Cal were working with when they planned to rob Orlean. That didn't work out, but when he died, you saw your chance and called Tim. Except by then, Bigby was involved. Was it your idea or Tim's idea to use Puck here to snatch the ring?
Jack spoke loudly, hoping that if Tess heard him, she would be able to call for him.
This isn't crime TV. I'm not going to spill my guts to you.
But something went wrong,
Jack continued, ignoring Jacob.
You had the ring at your grandfather's shop, but Ricky ended up selling it to me.
Let's just say that I didn't expect my grandfather to be going through the safe that day.
So he found it and Ricky accidentally picked it up and sold to me. But why kill him? He was your grandfather.
It was Cal's gun.
But Cal's not a killer. Tim says you took the gun and killed your grandfather. That's cold, Jacob,
Jack said, repeating what Tim said about Jacob's anger at his grandfather, who at the time was threatening to call the police.
Like anyone would believe them.
They might. Tim and Cal have a long history of crime, but not murder.
My grandfather sent my mother to jail when she was on drugs. Do you really think he wouldn't do the same to me for stealing?
Why didn't you try to take it when you saw us at Ricky's?
I wasn't sure you had it. I would have had to kill you all, which would have tipped off the cops.
Jacob's grin was about as evil as Jack had ever seen.
I thought about it, though.
So you sent Cal to do it, and when that didn't work, you sent Puck here.
Right. Now where's the ring?
Tess first.
Let him see her.
Cameron hobbled on her crutches towards Puckett.
Then we'll make the trade and be done.
Puckett looked to Jacob, who paused, then nodded.
Over here.
Puckett motioned to an office door. Jack followed Puckett, checking over his shoulder to make sure Cameron and Jacob weren't planning a surprise like shooting him in the back.
She's in there.
Jack looked at Puckett and then at the door. He turned the knob, pushing the door open. The first thing he noticed were plastic ties on the floor. Then he saw the chair pushed up to the open window.
Atta girl,
he said to himself, relieved she escaped. He had to think fast about how he wanted to play it. Should he be outraged? Should he close the door, hand over the ring, and walk out? If he did that, Cameron, Jacob, and Puckett would wonder why he was leaving without Tess. He slipped his hand into his pocket, his fingers fumbling with the ring box.
Is this a joke?
Jack asked.
What?
Cameron moved as quickly as her crutches would take her to the office.
The room is empty.
Cameron pushed him aside. Jack took the opportunity to move calmly but quickly towards the exit. He heard Puckett let out a stream of expletives. Jacob ran to the office to see for himself. He joined in on the expletives, except they were directed toward Puckett. Jack was nearly at the exit, his fingers brushed over the knob of the door.
Stop him! I want that ring!
Jacob yelled.
Stop!
Puck shouted. But Jack was too close to being out the door to stop. He pulled the door toward him. A loud bang echoed through the building. Jack waited for the force of a bullet, the searing pain. It seemed he'd only just recovered from his last bullet wound, and now he was going to have another. Instead, he felt air and saw the glass in the door shatter. He stopped.
You aren't leaving until I have that ring,
Jacob said, standing next to Puckett. Jack reached into his pocket.
Stop,
Puckett said, waving his gun at Jack.
The ring is in my pocket.
Slowly take it out,
Puckett ordered. Jack pulled out a black velvet box. He held it up.
Here it is. Frankly, I'll be glad to be rid of it. The curse is true, you know.
Puckett's eyes narrowed.
What curse?
Didn't Cameron tell you? The ring brings bad luck.
You don't strike me as someone who believes in curses,
Jacob said. anticipation dancing in his eyes. Jack shrugged.
I've had nothing but bad luck since I bought it. Even if you get out of here and out of the country, I'm pretty sure your luck won't be much better.
That's where you're wrong. I'm not keeping the ring. In 24 hours, the ring and its curse will belong to someone else. For a tidy sum, of course.
You'd sacrifice your friend for money?
Jack said to Cameron.
On her wedding day.
She swallowed hard, shook her head slightly. Realizing he needed to make his move, Jack yelled,
"Here!"
tossing the box toward Jacob, but out of his reach. As they scrambled to get it, Jack opened the door.
He's getting away.
Puckett yelled,
"Let him! We've got the ring!"
Jack ran toward the truck, disappointed that Daniel and his buddies were nowhere in sight. Then he heard the wail. He knew that wail. It was the wail of disappointment. The wail of realizing you'd been duped. The wail of a man ready to kill. He yanked open the door of the truck, lunging himself inside. He fumbled with the keys and looked up when he saw Jacob and Puckett run out the door, with Cameron hobbling on her crutches behind them. This time Jacob had the gun, probably in the same way he'd taken Cal's gun when he killed his grandfather, Jack thought.
"Give me the ring,"
Jacob demanded, firing a shot. Jack ducked, feeling the glass of Daniel's truck window shatter around him.
"Where are you, Daniel?"
he wondered. He waited for another shot, but instead he heard a whap and a grunt. Lifting his head, he saw Cameron swinging her crutch back to land another blow on Jacob, but Puckett grabbed her mid-swing. Jack wasn't sure what to make of it. Was she attacking them? Her broken leg eliminated her ability to defend herself. Puckett knocked her over, pinned her on the ground.
"I'm going to kill you!"
Jacob stood over Cameron, pointing the gun at her, and Jack realized he needed to do something. She may have betrayed them, but he didn't want her to die. Another shot rang out.
Jesus, no.
But when Jack looked, Jacob was on his back, writhing in pain. Puckett stood back, both arms raised. Cameron lay on the ground, catching her breath.
Police! Finally,
Jack thought.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Tales from the Heart. I hope you enjoyed it and that you'll be back to find out what happens next. What is Cameron's involvement in this scheme, and will Jack and Tess ever finally get married? Now remember, you can listen to full uncensored episodes over at reamstories.com/Jenna Harte. Just click the follow button and then select With This Ring I Thee Kill audio for all the episodes. If you'd like to read along or get ahead in the story, you can get With This Ring I Thee Kill from your favorite ebook retailer or save by buying direct from me. All the details and links you might need are click away in the description. Don't miss the next episode. Hit the subscribe button so you'll know when it's posted. And thank you again for listening. Until next time, this is Jenna Harte wishing you peace, love, and happily ever after.